Hello, friends, and let's get started.
I'm Thomas. I'm usually called Tom, or just T. I live in a suburban home with my wife. Her name is Caitlin, and we have been married for 5 years. I have always considered myself a person who is not afraid of work and responsibility. I'm the master of my own destiny. I'm building a career in sales, driving my own car, and living by my own rules, or so I wanted to think just yesterday. My life, as it seemed to me, was built on a brick, a full-fledged marriage, my own cozy house with a garden, a dog, a fluffy golden retriever named Barley, our 2 children and the plans for the future, and a quiet happiness, which seems to never end. But sometimes fate weaves its patterns, scattering small stones on a smooth path. And now, on Thanksgiving Day, they began to crunch underfoot. This holiday date has always been special to us. For some reason, it's that fall day when we set the table with turkey, cranberry sauce, pumpkin pie, and sipping a glass of wine that I've associated with peace and joy. This year, my wife was especially insistent that we should spend it big. Maybe it was because she sensed my endless tiredness from the workday, or maybe she just wanted to change. Either way, I supported her idea. But in the back of my mind, I still felt a strange wariness, as if the pause between heartbeats was a little longer than usual. The morning was sunny, though the forecast said it would rain. Soft golden rays flooded the kitchen. Caitlin had gotten up at dawn and had already put a large turkey in the oven, generously buttered and seasoned with herbs. Bowls of ingredients were scattered around the table in the kitchen, which we had remodeled in a more modern style almost a year ago. My wife fidgeted between them, deftly jumping from recipe to recipe, while holding the hem of her frivolous short robe. Her pinkish silk robe is a little translucent, and she usually only wears it when it's just the two of us. "Good morning," I said, wheezing it out after a lingering nap. "Hi, sweetie," she replied, and moved closer to kiss my cheek. She had a light peach-colored lipstick on her lips, and her hands still held traces of flour. She had such a charming combination of homely carelessness and femininity. My attention was drawn to the outfit she was going to wear for the party, a red, tight-fitting dress hung on the back of a chair, bold enough to attract dozens of stares. Thin fabric, a slightly protruding neckline, and a cutout in the back. I thought it was too much for a house party, but on the other hand, she looked bombastic in it, and my heart beat a little faster. Once upon a time, I'd been happy to see her try to look so gorgeous for me. But now I noticed that the dress was new, clearly bought recently. I didn't remember her consulting me on the choice, and that simple fact somehow touched some invisible nerve inside me. "We're just having our usual family dinner, aren't we?" I asked, starting to talk about the upcoming feast. "Yeah, of course it's family. But I thought it would be nice to invite a couple of coworkers from work," she said as she continued to stir something on the stove. "I mean, it's Thanksgiving. It's a friendly atmosphere. Why not? Let them see how we live and eat some goodies. I've told them so much about your wine selection and your cooking skills. And then there's this senior manager I sometimes collaborate with on projects. Maybe that will improve my chances for promotion." She said this between kisses on the cheek, either try to woo me or convincing me that it was a perfectly harmless gesture of hospitality. It seemed like a small thing, but for some reason I felt a certain distrust, though I didn't show it. As I moved closer to the stove to check on the turkey, my wife added, "One of them is Rick. He's practically a star in our company." "Rick?" I interjected, trying to see if I'd ever heard that name before. I don't think I had. "Yeah, a tall guy with a Hollywood smile," Caitlin said quickly, grinning. "But very nice. He just transferred to our office. All the girls at work admire him. At least that's what I've heard." The note in her voice sent a slight pang of jealousy through my chest, but I immediately forced myself to shift my focus. I'm a man, a confident man, and besides, anyone out there gets praise. Rick's just a statistical error, a coworker, a lot of them. Or maybe I'm just exaggerating. Nevertheless, my attention was involuntarily drawn to her description. It's amazing how much she knows about his Hollywood smile and the fact that all girls like him. And the way she spoke, the slight smile that touched the corners of her lips when she mentioned his name, it was unsettling. I smiled, trying to hide the confusion, and said, "Okay, invite him over. Let's see who Rick is." I thought to myself, let's make sure he's just a coworker. Maybe there's nothing special there. At that moment, however, I felt as if someone was pulling an imperceptible string inside me, foretelling me that today's party would not be as homey and familiar as I had expected. The sun was rising higher and higher, illuminating the fall-colored front lawn. Barley, our retriever, ran around, occasionally glancing out the window as if sensing my confusion. I pretended I was fine, but something in my soul was already sparking anxiety. Toward evening, I pulled on a fresh shirt and ironed my pants. I looked in the mirror, 30-something tall, not a bad figure, eyes in which someone had once seen confidence. "I'm fine. I'll be fine," he told himself mentally, but there was still a slight chill on my chest, not easy to get rid of. When I came downstairs, the table was already set, a couple of wine glasses, wooden hot plates, a wide china turkey platter in the center. Caitlin was walking around the house in her red dress, occasionally fixing her hair. I admired her. She looked very sexy indeed. Her hair was in a neat bun, a few flirty curls framing her face, soft makeup emphasizing her eyes. The scent of perfume emanated from her, the same perfume I'd given her for our wedding anniversary. The scent that had once driven me crazy. The thought flashed through my mind as to why it was all so ostentatious today. But I kept talking myself into it. It's a holiday, and she wants to shine as a hostess. It's probably just her natural inclination. I noticed her looking out the window and at the clock, worrying when the guests would arrive. And sure enough, the doorbell rings. Our house suddenly comes to life even more. The doors open, and laughing people come in. I put a smile on my face, anticipating that it would still be a regular friendly evening. But just then, from the doorway, I see a tall guy with a svelte face and a confident posture that's Rick lift a glance at Caitlin. And that gaze lasts a second longer than what could be called a welcoming look. He really does look like he's from a movie screen. Trim, his suit fits him impeccably. He smiles broadly, showing even white teeth. And for some reason, he immediately touches my wife's hand, squeezing it a little more than necessary for a simple handshake. He glides his gaze over her, then turns to me. "Hi, I'm Rick, Caitlin's coworker. You must be Thomas?" "Yes," I answer, sensing that the same premonition wasn't misleading. "Welcome." The festive screen door cracked, but I didn't realize how deep the cracks would go. Our living room filled with voices, laughter, the clatter of dishes. Along with Rick came two other employees, Laura and Greg, nice people at first glance and really good conversationalists. They were actively talking about all sorts of office stories, trying not to leave out any funny details. I kept the conversation going, asking about current projects, trying to make a favorable impression on the guests. At the same time, I kept glancing at Rick. He was paying too much attention to Caitlin. As soon as she passed him to serve another dish, he leaned over and whispered something to her, and she smiled. I'd never seen her laugh so lightheartedly. That smile seemed more intimate than one would expect from a simple office flirtation. We were served wine. I, being a connoisseur of varieties and wineries, tried to choose the best option for the evening, a fortified red wine with rich berry notes. The guests praised the flavors, complimented our home, and talked about how much they enjoyed the setting. Against the evening twilight, the lamps in the living room created a soft, golden glow, as if we were in a cozy advertisement for Christmas coziness. It was warm, fragrant, and outwardly very family-like. But I was the only one who felt something was wrong. Like a small grain of sand caught on my tongue, it spoiled the whole experience. Rick was telling some funny story about how he and Caitlin stayed in the office late for extra work, and how the boss amusingly misunderstood their diligence. I noticed the way he looks at my wife at the words, extra work, winking. She floods with laughter. But it was a laugh I'd call hips, not voice, when her body arches slightly forward, her breasts lifted, her lips ajar. And it's all aimed in Rick's direction. I sit up and feel a bad wave building up inside me, though I try to keep my expression calm on the outside. Hell, there are other guests around, and they don't suspect a thing. And I think it's pretty obvious. Soon we were at the dining room table, where the turkey with a deliciously brown crust was cooking. Caitlin can cook, and that's one of the things I've always loved about her. When everyone was already seated, she started putting the salad on the plates. The salad was arugula, pear and walnuts, her specialty. That's when I noticed her hand linger on Rick's forearm for a second as she held out the bowl. A slight movement, maybe accidental, but for some reason, it rasped in my soul like an alarm. I looked into Rick's eyes and saw a smug grin there, addressed to me, as if to say, "Yes, I'm here with your wife, and I know you can see that." I sighed and took a sip of wine, trying to calm a nervous lump in my throat. All of our other guests were having fun, laughing, chatting about the weather and holiday plans. I caught a glimpse of Greg whispering to Laura, and both of them furtively watching Rick and Caitlin. Apparently, they noticed the strange closeness, too, though they were trying not to jump to conclusions. Maybe I was just getting suspicious, though, and I was being too harsh in my interpretation of everything that was going on. The conversation livened up when Caitlin proposed a toast to our loved ones, friends, and family, and to the good things of this year. She raised her glass, smiling Hollywood style, and Rick gave her a subtle nod as he clinked his hands together. I frowned faintly in response, and a shadow of jealousy flickered across my face. But I hid it behind a polite smile. The irritation inside me was growing. The wine was adding fuel to the fire. A slight euphoria mingled with the ringing of anxiety. But I pulled myself together still, trying to behave with the restraint of a host. Respect for the guests and for myself demanded that I not make a scandal right now at the table. And that was the thin line that held my rage. Soon the feast continued, but I was seething inside. I saw them glance over, saw her face light up with laughter when he said something quietly to her. Saw her knee almost touch his leg under the table as she moved. Every such gesture sounded a resounding siren in my head. "Look what's going on, Tom. Don't be blind." But I remained seated, not putting outwardly all that was going on in my soul. I found any safe topic to fill the awkward pauses, trying to divert my attention to conversations about politics, about the news, about the upcoming winter holidays. At the same time after time, I convinced myself that all was not lost. Maybe I'm just jealous for no reason. I mean, we've always been open with each other. No, this Rick is too obviously interested in her, and she's too obviously reciprocating. Laura's loud laughter brought me out my deep thoughts. I looked around at the guests and felt the room suddenly feel stuffy. Either it was the wine, or nerves, or an underlying sense of resentment for this obviously immodest game. However, I continued to hold on while I had the chance, until something more egregious happened. I didn't want to fan a spark into a flame. I believed that maybe this would all be over as the evening drew to a close. But fate had decreed otherwise. After we finished the main course, the plates began to empty, the living room buzzing with conversation. Caitlin got up to suggest dessert. I also wanted to help her in the kitchen, but she reassured me, "Tom, you've already done so much. Sit down, rest. I'll get the apple pie and ice cream myself." Apparently, she was hoping to show off her housekeeping skills. Or she wanted to spend a few minutes alone with Rick, I thought grimly. But I didn't say a word. I really should have gone out to take out the overflowing garbage bag so that there wouldn't be waste on the table when dessert arrived. I went out into the yard, and Barley greeted me with a happy wag of his tail. The sky was starting to darken, the air was getting cool, and I felt a faint chill on my skin. Walking back to the front door, I sighed, trying to release the tension. I paused for a few seconds before walking back in, try to calm my heart, which was beating irregularly, and drown out my chaotic thoughts. When I opened the front door quietly, I knew immediately that something was going on in the hallway. The sound of voices didn't come from the living room. It sounded like everyone was sitting there arguing about something, but not very loudly. I cautiously walked a little farther, and from around the corner, I heard distinct whispers coming from the kitchen. I recognized Rick's voice, low and slightly husky. "Baby, you're driving me crazy. You look like fire in that dress." I froze. My heart pounded so hard I could hear my pulse in my ears. It was as if my whole body had become a nerve. Moments before, I hadn't been 100% sure if she was cheating on me. But now those doubts were dispelled. He called her baby, and there was a distinct passion in his voice. I moved slowly toward the kitchen door and lurked, trying to figure out what was going to happen next. "Sure," Caitlin replied, but the quiet didn't sound like a protest. It was more like a half-joking remark, as if she were afraid someone would hear them. You turn me on enough as it is, but here, in the house where Tom is, she chuckled, not pushing him away, not saying stop, not saying don't you dare treat me like that. On the contrary, there was a flirtatious smile in her voice. It was as if she was completely immersed in his company. At that moment, I was standing in the hallway with a fucking bag of trash in my hand. For a moment, I clenched my fists, and I had to keep myself from flying into the kitchen and tearing it all to hell. But I knew that if I broke in screaming now, I'd ruin myself in front of the guests, and maybe even Rick would get away with it. No, I needed to act coldly, quietly. I was already thinking about their possible connection, about their secret meetings, about how I'd been a fool to pay for her expenses while she was having an affair on the side. All of these images flew by like a slideshow in a compressed fraction of a second. I heard Caitlin laugh softly, the kind of laugh I'd once liked when she was happy with me. But now it sounded like a sneer. I shuddered. "You're driving me crazy," Rick said again, apparently pulling her to him. There was a slight sound of bodies touching, or the palm of a hand against the fabric of her dress. I imagined him maybe pressing her against the table or stroking her waist. The bag in my hand rustled from the squeeze, and I realized I needed to get a grip on myself before I smashed anything and everything. Literally moments later, I decided to step away from the door so I don't give myself away. After all, if they noticed me, the evening would take a completely different turn. But no, I wanted them out in the open. I wanted Rick to get what he deserved so that Caitlin couldn't justify we didn't have anything. At the same time, I was seething with rage, hurt pride, a burning sense of betrayal. I didn't know what was keeping me from picking a fight right now. Perhaps a habit of not tolerating quarrels in front of the other guests. Perhaps a deep-seated hope that my wife would stop it all on her own. Or the fear that if I threw myself in there, I'd see a picture I could never forget. But most of all, it was like that moment when you stand in front of a cliff and look down, feeling like you're about to take the decisive step. A cold rage churned in my chest. I turned around and headed back to the living room, as calmly as I could, trying to put a neutral expression on my face. When I arrived in the living room, Greg and Laura were just discussing some latest marketing project. They were arguing animatedly about something, laughing. I brought some movement into the room. I set the bag down next to the entrance. I should have thrown in the trash can, but for now I wasn't in a position to go there again. Pour myself some bourbon into a glass. I rarely drink hard liquor, but here I wanted to immediately drown out the storm inside. Alcohol isn't the best counselor, but what else could I do? Caitlin came back into the living room about 20 seconds later, a slight blush on her face, an apple pie she was holding on a platter, and an ice cream cone in her other hand. Rick appeared at her back, adjusting the sleeves of his jacket in an almost casual manner. I glanced over the rim of my glass at him, but he tried not to meet my gaze. There was an obvious awkwardness in the room for a moment, but then all the guests smiled, delighted at the appearance of dessert. I drained my glass of bourbon halfway down in one gulp and sank into the chair, trying to look nonchalant. I needed time to decide how best to proceed. I didn't want to make Anna right now, but I knew I wouldn't be patient for long. Within minutes, I had a cold plan inside of me. Wait until everyone had moved the conversation back to the living room, when everyone was a little more relaxed. And then, in front of everyone, ask Rick how dare he call my wife baby in my house. I wanted it to sound like a sudden hammer hitting an anvil. But as I sat there, gently shaking the glass with the rest of the bourbon, Caitlin and Rick settled on our couch, as if oblivious to the other's presence. Laura moved to the chair across from us and looked at me. I noticed in her eyes something like understanding, pity, or a realization that the atmosphere had become tense. Perhaps she intuitively sensed that my relationship with my wife was not as perfect as they thought it was. I, on the other hand, pretended that everything was fine. I watched Rick touch Caitlin's back for a second, as if to put his arm around her waist. And if before I'd been tossing between doubt and jealousy, now I knew enough was enough. I'd had enough. I barely listened to Greg and Laura, who were still surprisingly conversational, trying to maintain the illusion of a party. I finished the rest of the bourbon in one gulp. I didn't even feel the usual burning sensation, so consumed with rage and bitterness. There was the sound of my clenched knuckles as I set the glass on the table. Everyone had already fallen into a semi-quiet conversation, and I rose to my feet. A second, too. I took a breath and realized it was time. The room was suddenly quiet as I asked a direct question. I knew it was like throwing a bomb into the silence. "Rick," I said in a calm, even quiet voice, "did you just call my wife, baby?" In that instant, everyone turned to me. Laura looked astonished. Greg raised his eyebrows. Caitlin went pale at the same moment, as if a light had been turned off in her. And Rick froze, like a predator caught off guard. He started, trying to find the words, but stopped. "It's just a joke." I took a step toward the couch, keeping my hand in my pants pockets so I wouldn't hit him right away. My voice remained cold. "Baby, is this your joke?" "An interesting joke, considering I heard your conversation in the kitchen. Maybe we could all laugh about it." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Laura and Greg interjecting, clearly unsure of where to go from here. The look on my wife's face was fear and shame at the same time. She couldn't get a word out. "Tom," she tried to say, rising suddenly. "You've got it all wrong." "Shut up," I told her, raising my palm in a muffled gesture. "I'll have a separate conversation with you. Right now, I'm talking to him." Rick stood up, trying to keep his dignity, but I stepped closer and shoved him toward the door, causing him to stumble. My rage burst out, and as soon as he tried to resist for a second, I was ready to fight. But instead, Rick turned pale and backed away. With a quick glance at Caitlin, he didn't make any more excuses. "Hands off other people's wives, clown," I repeated, looking him in the eye, and then, without a second's hesitation, I pointed toward the exit. "Get out of my house. Now." He opened his mouth for a moment, as if he wanted to say something, but only exhaled something incomprehensible, partly like "sorry, man," or "we didn't," but I didn't let him finish. My hand hooked into the collar of his jacket and lifted it a little, urging him toward the exit. He pulled away, slipped awkwardly out of my grasp, and strode toward the door. His eyes read fear and defeat. Laura and Greg, confused, jumped toward him, trying not to get caught in his hot hand. Greg tried to clap me on the shoulder conciliatorily, but he saw my face and realized it was better not to do that now. I watched in silence as the three of them went out into the hallway, grabbing their jackets and bags in a hurry, whispering. Rick didn't even look back, partly, I guess, afraid I might stab him in the back. And then, after a minute, they were gone. The door slammed shut. It was night outside, and it was probably drizzling, but that was the least of my worries. I turned to see Caitlin standing in the middle of the room, hands clasped across her chest, shivering. Her gaze darted around, her lips parted, but no words came out. All the fun and festive illusion collapsed in an instant. There was dead silence in the living room. Only somewhere in the kitchen the clock was ticking, and the faint light from the floor lamp illuminated my wife's face, distorted by fear and remorse. Or perhaps it wasn't sincerity, but a banal fear of being exposed. "Tom," she whispered, her eyes downcast. "I can explain everything." "Explain what?" I asked stiffly, coming closer. "That you sat on his lap when I wasn't around? That you called him sweetie, and he called you baby? That you apparently dated behind my back for a couple months? Or what?" "No, you've got it all wrong." Really, she was desperately trying to find the words. But I could see in her eyes that she knew I had it exactly the way it was. "Shut up." My voice sounded like an icy razor. "Don't you dare say I didn't get it. I heard it with my own ears. I saw it. You sat flirting with him in my house, unashamedly, in front of guests. You're no longer my wife if you allow that." I felt my jaw clench. Perhaps I had never spoken to her like that before, but there was no point in choosing words now. "Tom, I'm sorry, I don't know how it came out. He's been taking such good care of me at work lately. We've been talking a lot. It's just flirting, really, I swear to you. It wasn't anything serious. I was just confused." Her voice began to shake, her eyes filling with tears. She took a slow step toward me, as if she wanted to hug me. But I was petrified. Not a muscle flinched when she touched my shoulder. "Don't touch me," I said and stepped back. "I'm not your lifeline anymore." "What? Were you hoping I'd just silently put up with all this? That I'd buy your lies and live my life like I used to? No, that's enough." She sobbed, pressing her palms to her face. I felt pity for a moment. I had once adored this woman. I had been willing to give up everything for her. But now I knew that pity was useless. She had betrayed me. And even if it wasn't a scandal in bed, maybe they didn't have physical intimacy until the end, though I didn't believe it anymore. But the moral betrayal was so obvious that I was seething with resentment and pain. Without another word, I walked to our bedroom. I opened the closet where her clothes were kept and pulled out a suitcase. I began to throw everything I could get my hands on into it. Dresses, blouses, underwear, makeup bag. She came running in. "Tom, what are you doing?" "Stop it," she cried through her tears. "Let's talk. I'll explain everything." "Well, we're a family. Don't ruin it in one moment." "In one moment," I exclaimed, turning around. "It was you who ruined everything for weeks, months, while you were flirting with him. Not me. I'm the one who has to deal with your lies now. You got it all figured out, haven't you? Bringing him to our house to what? So he can admire your perfect family life? Or maybe to tickle a nerve. I've been putting up with these innuendos all night. But enough. Get out." I'd already buckled my suitcase with force, tossed it to the floor, and turned to her with an expression that apparently scared her the most. "Pack your bags. Now, leave." She staggered to the edge of the bed and burst into tears. I stared at her, feeling a storm of conflicting feelings raging inside me. Anger, pain, the remnants of love that were agonizing, and the desire to throw it all out of my life once and for all. I didn't want to hear any more of her excuses. Maybe she really hadn't gone to the extreme in her relationship with Rick, but the very fact that she was close to it was killing me. And the very act of calling her baby behind my back, of laughing playfully, no, that was extreme. She caught my gaze, startled, and came closer. "Tom, I'm begging you to listen to me." Her voice broke. "Don't drive me away, please. We had a plan. The kids, a trip to Europe for Christmas. We've been through so much together. How could we?" I didn't move. I heard those words, but they bounced off me like a ball off a wall. It's too late. Too late. I had images in my head. Her in the red dress, her and Rick in the kitchen, her laughing, and him calling her baby. "Get your stuff," I repeated through clenched teeth. "And go to him, if he's taking such good care of you." Am I getting it all wrong? I'm sick to my stomach. You cheated on me, morally if not physically, and you did it under my nose. She grabbed my hand, trembling, wet with tears, tried to cling to me, but I recoiled as if from a poisonous snake. Then she realized she had to leave. All her bravado crumbled. She stood up, wiped away her tears with the back of her hand. "All right," she said at last, with a detached look. "I'll go, but I hope you'll come to your senses and realize that we can fix this." "Fix it?" I grinned bitterly. "You could have fixed it before you let him in between us. It's too late now." I turned and walked out into the hallway, not wanting to see her packing. I stopped at the living room window, watching as the rain began to cry small drops on the glass. Barley, my retriever, came over and rubbed his nose in my palm, sensing my condition. I stroked his head. It was probably the only warm gesture I was capable of right now. There were rustles of packing behind me. Caitlin was pulling out shoes, grabbing a coat rack, muttering something to herself in frustration. There was a feeling of utter emptiness inside me. Things I had feared all my life, betrayal, the destruction of my family, were now happening. But along with the pain, I felt a strange relief. It was as if some kind of veil had fallen from my eyes, and I knew that now I would live my life without deception. It's over. An hour later, I saw her standing outside the house, in the drizzling rain, with a suitcase in her hands. Her red dress, the same one she'd driven Rick crazy in, now looked utterly pathetic under the gray sky. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smudged, whether from tears or raindrops. I opened the door to the porch and looked at her one last time. "And don't come back," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Dinner was good. You weren't." She sobbed, but I slammed the door shut, not wanting to hear any more. I heard the suitcase clatter against the porch as she took a step. Her sobs echoed outside the door, but I didn't open it. I just pulled back the curtain and watched her walk to her car and get in. The silence of the house was broken only by the pounding of the rain on the roof. When I turned around to go back into the living room, I was greeted by a mess: leftover pie, glasses of unfinished wine, upturned plates on the table. The air smelled bitter, as if all the aromas of turkey and herbs had displaced that acrid plume of disappointment. It was going to take me a long time to rebuild my life. But at least I knew for sure I would not tolerate betrayal. I would not be a victim. I ended the relationship on my own, preserving something important, my own honor. So ended our Thanksgiving, which was supposed to be warm, joyous, and family-oriented. Instead, it became a day of the destruction of one family and the collapse of illusions. But let's be honest, sometimes you have to burn bridges to get free. And I, Thomas, felt that by freeing myself from the lies, I could move on with my life. Albeit with the sad lessons of the past, but honestly and truly. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and comment. We'd love to discuss this story with you. See you in the next video.